Welcome. If you enjoy these stories, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, comment which video you found the scariest. Now lie back, relax, and let sleep consume you. The taste of salt and rebellion was sweet on our tongues as we heaved the captain's body overboard. His greed had become unbearable, his leadership erratic. The lure of a larger share of the plunder had united us, a silent pact sealed in blood under the pale moonlight. We celebrated our newfound freedom with stolen rum and boisterous shouts. The weight of the captain's tyranny lifted. The initial days following the mutiny were filled with a sense of liberation. We divided the loot, each man richer than before. The ship felt lighter, the atmosphere less strained. We charted a new course, eager to embrace our independent futures. Then the sightings began, whispers at first, hushed conversations in the dead of night. Someone had seen him. Standing on the deck, near the railing, his rotten corpse illuminated by the moon's eerie glow. We dismissed it as a drunken hallucination, the product of guilt-ridden minds. But the whispers persisted, growing louder, more insistent. Others had seen him too, always at night, always the same image, the captain, his flesh decaying, his eyes vacant yet somehow accusatory, staring out at the endless sea. Fear began to gnaw at the edges of our newfound joy. Paranoia took root, poisoning the camaraderie we had briefly shared. We eyed each other with suspicion, wondering who would be next to claim a sighting. We tried to reason with ourselves. It was the sea playing tricks on our minds, the stress of the mutiny manifesting in shared nightmares. We changed course, hoping to outrun the visions, to leave the memory of our deed behind. But he remained. No matter which direction we sailed, no matter how far we travelled, the captain's rotten corpse continued to appear on deck each night. His presence was silent, his stare unwavering, a constant reminder of our betrayal. One by one, the crew began to vanish. A man who had boasted loudest during the mutiny was gone one morning, his bunk empty, no sign of struggle. Another, consumed by fear, attempted to flee in a small boat, only to be found days later, his lifeless body clinging to the wreckage, his face frozen in terror. The disappearances grew more frequent, more inexplicable. Some simply vanished from their posts during the night, their absence discovered at dawn. The ship, once filled with the raucous sounds of pirates, grew increasingly silent, the air heavy with dread. We turned on each other, accusations flying, desperate to find a cause, a solution to the relentless horror that was consuming us, but there was no escape, no explanation. The captain's silent, rotting presence continued, a spectre haunting our every waking moment. I watched as my fellow mutineers succumbed to fear and the unseen force that stalked our ship. Their bravado had evaporated, replaced by a desperate yearning for escape, but the sea offered no refuge, and the captain's corpse remained our constant companion. Now, I am the last. The ship is eerily silent, the only sound the creaking of the timbers and the mournful sigh of the wind in the sails. The fog has rolled in, a thick white blanket that obscures the horizon, isolating us in a world of grey and silence. I turned from the railing, a sense of finality washing over me. There at the helm stood the captain. His flesh was putrid, his bones visible beneath the decaying skin. His vacant eyes, however, held a semblance of amusement, a chilling satisfaction. A grotesque smile stretched across his rotten face as the ship sailed deeper into the fog, the unseen currents guiding us towards an unknown destination. The endless expanse of the Atlantic stretched before us, a monotonous canvas of grey under a leaden sky. Our merchant vessel, sturdy and reliable, ploughed through the waves, its mission routine. Then a shape emerged from the distant haze, a dark silhouette against the horizon. As we drew nearer, the form resolved into a ship, adrift and silent, its sails tattered and torn. Curiosity mingled with a sense of apprehension among our crew. We approached cautiously, maneuvering our vessel alongside the derelict. There was an unnatural stillness about the other ship, a silence that seemed to swallow the sounds of the sea. A decision was made to board, to search for any sign of life, any explanation for its abandoned state. A small group of us, myself included, crossed the narrow gap between the two vessels. The deck of the adrift ship groaned under our feet, the wood damp and decaying. An immediate sense of unease settled upon us. The air was cold, heavy with a silence that felt almost tangible. We moved cautiously through the deserted vessel. The cabins were in disarray, personal belongings scattered as if their owners had left in haste. A sense of tragedy permeated every corner. Then we found them, in the captain's quarters and in the cramped bunks below deck. Corpses. Their bodies were preserved by the salt air, but their faces were frozen in expressions of utter terror, eyes wide with a horror that transcended death, mouths agape in silent screams. A wave of nausea washed over me. The sight was deeply unsettling, a stark testament to some unknown catastrophe. We exchanged uneasy glances, a silent acknowledgement of the grim discovery. We should have turned back then, retreated to the relative safety of our own ship. But a morbid curiosity, a need to understand, kept us there. The moment my foot touched the deck of our own vessel again, a change occurred in the surrounding atmosphere. A dense fog rolled in with astonishing speed, swirling around us, reducing visibility to mere feet. And then, through the swirling mist, it materialized. A ship, unlike any I had ever seen. Its timbers were dark and weathered, seemingly older than time itself. Its sails, though tattered, billowed, as if caught by a phantom wind, and upon its deck indistinct figures moved, their forms spectral and menacing. A ghostly vessel, an apparition from the depths of the ocean. A primal fear gripped me. This was no ordinary ship. This was something else, something ancient and malevolent. The realization dawned with chilling clarity. Pirates, long dead perhaps, but their spectral presence was undeniably terrifying. Panic erupted among our crew. Shouts of alarm, though no actual words were formed, filled the air. We scrambled back towards our own ship, desperate to escape the spectral vessel that had appeared so suddenly. But it was too late. The ghostly ship drew alongside with impossible speed, its spectral crew seeming to glide across the water. They boarded our vessel without a sound, their forms translucent in the swirling fog, yet radiating an aura of deadly intent. One of our crew members, a young man barely out of his teens, vanished first. One moment he was beside me, his face pale with terror. The next he was gone, as if plucked from existence by an unseen hand. A silent scream seemed to echo in the fog-laden air. Then another disappeared, and another, each vanishing accompanied by a chilling silence, a void where their presence had been just moments before. Fear turned to sheer terror as we realized we were trapped, prey to these phantom pirates. I tried to fight, to defend myself against the intangible figures that surrounded us, but my efforts were futile. Their touch was cold, like the grave, and a sense of utter despair washed over me as they passed through my body. The wind howled through the rigging, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the silent screams of my disappearing crewmate. The fog swirled relentlessly, obscuring everything, creating a disorienting and terrifying landscape. I found myself alone on the deck of our ship. The ghostly pirate vessel remained alongside, its spectral crew still moving silently, their work seemingly done. The bodies of the merchant crew on the other ship were no longer visible through the dense fog. The first rays of dawn began to pierce through the mist, casting an eerie light upon the scene. The ghostly ship began to fade, its form becoming less distinct until it finally vanished entirely, leaving only the swirling fog and the sound of the wind. As the fog gradually dissipated with the rising sun, I looked around. Our merchant vessel was silent, empty, just like the one we had found adrift the day before. The ocean stretched out in all directions, vast and indifferent. There was no sign of my crewmates, no sign of the ghostly pirates, only the battered, silent ship alongside and the endless, empty sea. The coastal village had offered little resistance. Our raid was swift and brutal, the screams of the inhabitants echoing through the narrow streets as we plundered their homes and took whatever caught our eye. The taste of victory, mingled with the tang of salt and blood, filled the air as we set sail, our ship laden with spoils. The sickness manifested subtly at the outset, a feverish flush on a few faces, a quiet cough that spread through the crew. We dismissed it as a common ailment, a minor inconvenience after a successful raid. The sea air, we reasoned, would soon clear it, but the fever intensified, the coughs grew more violent, then came the skin, a dark discoloration appearing on hands and faces, spreading rapidly like ink spilled on parchment. It was more than discoloration, it was a blackening, a putrefaction, that seemed to emanate from within. The first scream ripped through the night, a sound of pure agony that jolted everyone awake. One of our strongest men lay thrashing in his bunk, his skin a grotesque shade of black, his eyes wide with terror. He clawed at his flesh as if trying to tear it away, his body contorting in unnatural ways. He died before dawn, his body stiff and cold, his skin a uniform ebony. We committed him to the sea, a grim silence falling over the crew, but death offered no release. Later that day we found him, floating alongside our ship, his blackened face bobbing in the waves, his eyes open and staring. Fear gripped us then, a cold dread that seeped into our bones. This was no ordinary sickness. This was something else, something ancient and malevolent. The dead man was not dead. He moved, his limbs jerking in an unsettling manner, his blackened lips peeling back to reveal teeth. He attacked, a silent, ravenous lunge towards one of his former comrades. The scene that followed was one of unimaginable horror. The living devoured the living, their bodies twisted by the same grotesque affliction. Screams of terror and pain echoed across the deck as the sickness spread, transforming our crew into monstrous, cannibalistic beings. I watched, paralyzed by fear, as my shipmates turned on each other. The bonds of camaraderie forged through years of piracy dissolved into a primal hunger. The deck became a scene of unimaginable carnage, the wood slick with blood and the blackening remains of my crew. One by one they fell, some succumbed to the sickness, their bodies rising to join the feast. Others were torn apart by their former friends, their screams abruptly silenced. The ship, once a symbol of our power, became a floating charnel house. I retreated to the captain's cabin, barricading the door, the sounds of the carnage outside a constant torment. Through the gaps in the wood I glimpsed the horrors unfolding on deck, blackened figures tearing at each other, their movements jerky and unnatural. Days and nights blurred together. The sounds of violence eventually subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. I ventured out cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The deck was deserted, littered with the remnants of the feast. Blackened corpses lay scattered, their hollow eyes staring blankly at the sky. I was alone. The sickness had claimed them all, turning my once loyal crew into a horde of undead monsters that had devoured each other until only I remained. The ship drifted aimlessly, a ghost vessel on a blood-red sea. The bodies of those who had fallen overboard floated alongside, a macabre escort in the endless ocean. Their blackened faces, their vacant eyes, were a constant reminder of the horror that had consumed my crew. The sun beat down on the silent ship, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. I stood at the helm, my hands gripping the wheel, though there was no course to steer. The sails flapped listlessly in the breeze, carrying me further into the vast, empty ocean. I was the last survivor, adrift in a sea of floating corpses. The silence broken only by the creaking of the ship and the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull. The sickness, the horror, the isolation, it remained unresolved, a chilling testament to the price of our greed. The sea stung my face as we hauled the notorious pirate captain onto the deck. His reign of terror across the seas was finally at an end. He stood defiant, his eyes burning with hatred, but his hands were bound, his fate sealed. Our captain, a stern and just man, gave the order. The noose was secured, the pirate led to the yardarm. A hush fell over the navy vessel as the sentence was carried out. The captain's body swung lifelessly against the vast expanse of the ocean, a stark warning to any who dared to follow his path. His crew, scattered by our attack, were nowhere to be seen. Justice, we believed, had been served. Years passed. I rose through the ranks, eventually commanding my own ship, a proud vessel under the flag of the Royal Navy. The memory of the pirate's execution, though significant at the time, faded into the background of countless voyages and naval engagements. Then the whispers began. Tales carried by returning ships, hushed conversations in port taverns. Men who had been part of that fateful execution were vanishing, not in battle, not to disease, but simply gone. Their ships found adrift, their crews bewildered, but the captains nowhere to be seen. The stories grew more disturbing. Survivors spoke of violent storms, sudden and inexplicable, appearing out of clear skies, and within these storms, a ship unlike any other. A vessel that seemed to materialize from the tempest itself, its sails black as night, its timbers groaning with an ancient sound. A ghostly ship, crewed by figures that resembled the dead. Fear began to ripple through the navy ranks. The disappearances seemed targeted, focused on those who had been aboard our vessel that day. A chilling realization dawned, the pirate captain's vengeance stretching beyond the grave. I dismissed the rumors as superstition, the product of frightened sailors' minds, but a seed of doubt had been planted, a prickle of unease that I could not entirely ignore. The vastness of the ocean held many mysteries, and some were best left undisturbed. One evening, as my ship sailed through calm waters, the sky turned an ominous shade of grey with startling speed. The wind howled, whipping the sea into a frenzy. Rain lashed down, obscuring everything in a torrential downpour. A storm, sudden and violent, had descended upon us. Through the raging tempest, I saw it, a dark shape emerging from the swirling water and rain. The ghostly ship, its black sails billowed in the gale, its form spectral and terrifying against the backdrop of the storm. It moved with an unnatural swiftness, cutting through the waves as if propelled by some unseen force. A wave of icy dread washed over me. The whispers, the rumors, they were true. This was no mere storm. This was something far more sinister, a manifestation of vengeance from beyond the watery grave. The ghostly ship drew alongside, its spectral crew visible now, their forms gaunt and pale, their eyes burning with a cold, ethereal light. They moved silently, effortlessly across the churning water, their gaze fixed upon my ship. Then they were aboard, phantoms gliding through the rain, their touch like ice. My crew fought bravely, but their weapons passed through the spectral figures as if they were mere illusions. Fear gave way to terror as the ghostly pirates advanced, their silent intent clear. They came for me. Their cold hands grasped me, their grip surprisingly strong. I struggled, I cried out, but no sound escaped my lips. I was lifted, weightless, and dragged towards the railing. Below, the churning ocean beckoned, dark and unforgiving. The ghostly ship loomed beside us, its spectral crew silent witnesses to my fate. I looked back at my own vessel, my loyal crew watching in horror, unable to help their captain. Then I was plunged into the icy depths. The coldness was immediate, shocking, stealing my breath. I sank rapidly, the darkness closing in around me. Above, through the swirling water, I could see the ghostly ship, its black sails disappearing into the storm. The pressure mounted, crushing my lungs. I struggled, kicking and flailing, but it was no use. I was being pulled down into the abyss. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me entirely was the faint, ethereal glow of the ghostly ship receding into the storm-tossed sea. The screams remained trapped within me, lost to the howling wind and the crushing depths. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched before us, an endless blue under a relentless sun, then on the horizon, resolving into a battered lifeboat adrift at the mercy of the waves. We approached cautiously, our pirate instincts wary of any potential trap. Inside, we found alive. He was gaunt and sunburnt, his eyes vacant. He claimed to remember nothing, not his name, not how he came to be adrift, not even the faintest details of his past. We took him aboard more out of a grudging sense of humanity. He was a shadow of a man, a blank slate. The strangeness began subtly. A crew member, a seasoned sailor who knew the stars like the back of his hand, suddenly couldn't recall the name of the North Star. At the night sky, a look of confusion etched on his face. We dismissed it as fatigue, the harshness of the sea taking its toll. But then others began to forget. Small things at first, the name of familiar tools, then larger gaps appeared in their memories, entire voyages forgotten, skills they had honed over years suddenly lost. A palpable unease settled over the ship. The changes faces seemed different overnight, subtle shifts in features that were difficult to pinpoint, but undeniably there. A familiar scar might vanish, an eye color seemed to change. It was as if the very were becoming fluid, shifting like the tides. I found myself struggling to recall details of my own past. Faces of loved ones flickered at the edge of my awareness. Names eluded me. Moments of my life felt distant. Fear took root within me. Something was terribly amiss. We searched the ship, desperate for an explanation. In the captain's cabin we found the logbook. Its pages were mostly blank, the entries abrupt. But on the last page, scrawled in a shaky hand, were 2 words, "You belong." The words sent a shiver down my spine. They felt ominous, a silent pronouncement of a fate we did not understand. had rescued remained an enigma. He seemed unaffected by the memory loss, his blank gaze unchanging, his silence unnerving. One by one, the crew began to fade. It wasn't always a physical disappearance, a gradual erasure of self. A man would become withdrawn, his eyes losing their spark, his responses becoming minimal until he was little more than a vacant shell. Others simply vanished during the night, their bunks empty, no trace. The ship, once bustling with activity, grew quieter, the number of familiar faces dwindling. The sense of camaraderie that had bound us together dissolved into a shared terror of the unknown. I looked at my own reflection in a tarnished piece of metal. The face that stared back seemed vaguely familiar, yet distant, as if belonging to someone else. Memories flickered and faded, increasingly fragmented. Now the ship is almost empty. A handful of us remain, adrift in a sea of forgotten identities. The castaway still wanders the deck, his vacant gaze fixed on the horizon. Collective amnesia. I can barely recall my own name. The faces of my former crewmates are fading into the mist of my lost memories. The ship sails on, guided by an unseen current. Its destiny. The logbook remains, its cryptic message a haunting reminder of our fate. The vast ocean stretches around us, an endless expanse that mirrors the emptiness growing within me. The memory of who we once were, of why we sailed away, leaving behind only a silent, drifting vessel with no recollection of its past. The violent storm had ripped our ship apart, tossing us into the churning sea like ragdolls. Exhausted and battered, I finally felt sand beneath my hands. Others from the crew had also made it, collapsing onto the shore of an uncharted island. A fragile sense of relief washed over us, quickly replaced by a gnawing discomfort. This place felt isolated, untouched. As dawn broke, revealing our surroundings, the disquiet intensified. The island was lush with dense jungle stretching inland, but an unnatural stillness permeated the air. Then we saw them, high in the branches of the trees, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Bones, human bones, tied together with what looked like rope, dangling like macabre ornaments. A collective gasp of horror rippled through our small group. The initial relief of survival evaporated, replaced by a chilling understanding. This was no ordinary island. This was something else entirely. Before we could fully process the gruesome discovery, a ship appeared on the horizon. A black flag with a skull and crossbones flapped ominously in the wind. Pirates! As their vessel drew closer, we could see figures on deck, their faces grim and expectant. They landed on the beach with a boisterous energy that belied the horror of our situation. Their leader, a hulking figure with a scarred face, surveyed us with a cruel grin. He gestured towards the bones in the trees, then back at us, a silent, terrifying revelation. This was their hunting ground. Panic seized our crew. Some tried to flee into the jungle, but the pirates were swift and merciless. One of our men was cut down before he even reached the tree line. His body was then dragged back to the beach, and with a sickening efficiency, his remains were added to the gruesome display in the trees. We were trapped, helpless. The pirates amused themselves with our terror, their laughter echoing through the otherwise silent island. One by one they picked us off. A sailor trying to reason with them was met with a swift blow, his body left to rot on the sand. Another, attempting to hide, was hunted down and brought back, his screams abruptly silenced. I watched in horror as my companions met their gruesome ends. Each death was a spectacle for the pirates, our bodies becoming trophies in their twisted game. The island, once a symbol of potential rescue, was now our prison, our graveyard. As the days bled into nights, the number of survivors dwindled. Hunger and fear gnawed at me. I hid deep within the jungle, the sounds of the pirates' revelry, a constant reminder of my impending doom. The bones in the trees served as a constant chilling reminder of what awaited me. One night, under the pale light of the moon, I made my way back to the beach. The pirates were asleep, their campfires flickering low. I found a large flat rock near the water's edge. With a sharp piece of flint I had managed to keep hidden, I began to carve letters, symbols, a desperate plea for anyone who might one day stumble upon this cursed place. A warning. My hands trembled as I worked, the silence of the night amplifying every scratch of the flint against the stone. The message was simple, raw with fear and despair. When it was finished, I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. The first hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. The pirates would soon be awake. I turned and fled into the darkness of the jungle, disappearing into the dense foliage. I kept running deeper and deeper into the island's interior, the sounds of the waking pirates fading behind me. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, not knowing where I was going, only knowing that I had to keep moving. The jungle grew denser, the trees taller, the shadows deeper. I pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to survive, but the island was vast and I was alone, hunted. The bones in the trees haunted my every step. The pirates' laughter echoed in my mind. I continued to run into the unknown heart of the island, the chilling silence closing in around me. Desperation had driven me to the unthinkable. Rival merchant fleets, bolder and more ruthless with each passing voyage, had been systematically dismantling my trade routes. My crew was loyal, but no match for armed privateers. In a gamble fueled by fear, I sought out those who truly understood the brutal realities of the sea pirates. Their reputation was fearsome, their methods savage, yet I believed I could control them, that the promise of gold would bind their loyalty, at least until I could regain my footing. The deal was struck in a dimly lit tavern, the terms unspoken but understood. Protection for a price. The initial days at sea were tense but uneventful. The pirates, a motley crew of hardened men, kept to themselves, their presence a constant simmering threat. My own crew remained wary, their unease growing with each passing mile. Then it happened. A swift, brutal betrayal. One moonless night, as we sailed through calm waters, the pirates turned. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. My crew, caught completely off guard, stood no chance. The pirates moved with terrifying efficiency, their blades flashing in the darkness. I was dragged from my cabin, forced to witness the slaughter. My loyal men who had sailed with me for years fell one by one, their cries of anguish echoing across the deck. The pirates laughed, their faces contorted in cruel amusement as they butchered my crew. I was held captive, forced to watch the carnage unfold, my heart a leaden mass in my chest. When the deck ran red with blood and the last of my crew lay still, the pirate captain turned to me. His eyes, cold and devoid of any humanity, offered a stark choice: join them or share the fate of my men. The terror of the preceding hours, the image of my crew's lifeless bodies, left me with no real alternative. I nodded, a silent agreement sealing my damnation. My life became a nightmare. I was forced to sail alongside these monsters, compelled to participate in their vile acts. Innocent ships were raided, their crews slaughtered, their cargo plundered. I was made to oversee the brutality, my hands stained with the blood of those I had once considered my peers. Sleep offered no escape. My nights were haunted by the faces of the dead, their silent accusations a constant torment. The laughter of the pirates echoed in my dreams, a chilling reminder of the horror I was now a part of. Years passed in this cycle of violence. The line between victim and perpetrator blurred. To survive, I had to become like them, to suppress any semblance of conscience, to participate fully in their depravity. The sea, once my livelihood, became a canvas for endless bloodshed. We preyed on merchant vessels, their crews offering little resistance. Each raid was a repetition of that first night, the screams, the carnage, the chilling laughter of my captors. My own face, I knew, had become hardened, my eyes reflecting the same emptiness I saw in theirs. There was no escape. The vast ocean was my prison, the pirate ship my cage. Every sunrise brought another day of horror, another act of violence I would be forced to commit or condone. The faces of the innocent men, women and children we had slaughtered haunted my waking hours. One day we attacked a small fishing vessel. The fishermen, poor and desperate, offered no resistance, yet the pirates fell upon them with their usual brutality. I watched, numb as their lives were extinguished. Their pleas for mercy, though unspoken, echoed in the silence of their final moments. As we sailed away, leaving the wreckage of their lives behind, I looked out at the endless horizon. The sun beat down on the blood-stained deck, the air thick with the stench of death. I was trapped, bound to these monsters by my own desperate choice. The cycle of horror continued, with no end in sight. The faces of the innocent, their silent screams, remained etched in my memory, a constant reminder of the man I had become, and the vast ocean stretched before us, promising only more of the same. The storm had tossed our ship relentlessly for days, leaving us battered and bruised. Seeking shelter near a desolate coastline, we stumbled upon a shipwrecked vessel, its timbers splintered, its cargo scattered across the sand. Amidst the debris I found it, a figurehead. It was the likeness of a woman, carved with exquisite detail from a dark polished wood. Her features were striking, her expression serene, almost knowing. There was an undeniable allure to the piece, a silent power that drew me in. Without hesitation, I ordered it attached to the prow of our ship, replacing our old weather-beaten carving. From that moment onward, our fortunes changed in ways that defied explanation. Our raids became unbelievably successful. Enemy ships seemed to surrender without a fight, their crews gripped by an inexplicable fear. Cannonballs that should have struck our hull veered off course. It was as if an unseen force protected us, guiding us to victory after victory. Our coffers swelled with gold, our reputation grew, and a sense of invincibility settled upon the crew. But the nights brought a disquieting counterpoint to our daytime triumphs. A faint crimson liquid began to seep from the wooden figurehead, tracing delicate lines down its smooth surface. It resembled blood, though it lacked the metallic scent. We scrubbed it away, attributing it to some strange property of the wood, but each night it returned. Then the disappearances began. A crew member would be present one evening, sharing a drink and a laugh, only to be gone by morning, his hammock empty. There were no signs of struggle, no explanations, just an absence, a growing void in our ranks. Paranoia began to fester among the crew. Whispers circulated about the figurehead, about the unnatural luck it brought, about the strange weeping at night. Some suggested we cast it back into the sea, but the memory of our recent successes held them back. The disappearances continued, each one more unsettling than the last. A seasoned lookout vanished from his post high in the rigging. A cook preparing the morning meal was simply gone when his assistant returned. The ship felt emptier with each passing day, the silence broken only by the creaking of the timbers and the mournful sigh of the wind. One morning I awoke to an absolute stillness. The usual sounds of the ship, the shuffling of feet, the murmur of voices were absent. A cold dread gripped me as I climbed out of my bunk and made my way onto the deck. The sight that greeted me was one of unimaginable horror. My crew, they hung from the rigging, their bodies swaying gently in the morning breeze. Their eyes were wide open, hollow and vacant, staring into some unseen abyss. Their faces were contorted in expressions of utter terror. I stood frozen, the blood running cold in my veins. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle creak of the ropes. I slowly turned towards the bow of the ship, my gaze drawn to the figurehead. The carved woman's serene expression was gone. In its place was a smile, a wide, knowing smile that stretched across her wooden face, her eyes seeming to gleam with a malevolent satisfaction. The crimson lines that traced her cheeks the night before were gone, replaced by the smooth, dark wood. The smile remained, chilling me to the very core, as our ship sailed onward, its course now guided by the silent, smiling figurehead. The island monastery stood serene against the rugged coastline, a beacon of peace we were determined to extinguish. Our captain, driven by greed and a thirst for destruction, had ordered the raid. The monks, their faces pale with fear but resolute, offered no resistance as we stormed their sanctuary. The massacre was swift and brutal. Their quiet chants were replaced by screams, their peaceful halls stained with blood. We ransacked the monastery, taking anything of value, leaving behind only death and desecration. As we sailed away, the island receded into the distance, a silent testament to our savagery. The curse manifested subtly at first. A feeling of unease settled upon the ship, a sense that we were being watched by unseen eyes. The usual boisterous camaraderie among the crew dwindled, replaced by a nervous tension. Then the deaths began. One of the younger pirates, a boastful brute, was found dead in his hammock one morning. His throat had been slashed, the wound clean and precise, as if made by an invisible blade. There was no struggle, no sound, just a lifeless body and a growing sense of dread among the rest of us. The next victim was an old sea dog, a man who had weathered countless storms and battles. His body was discovered floating in the sea, miles from the ship. His face was contorted in an expression of pure terror, his eyes wide with a horror that seemed to have followed him into death. Paranoia began to spread like wildfire. Accusations flew, suspicion poisoning every interaction. We were trapped on the ship together, surrounded by the vast, unforgiving ocean, and something unseen was picking us off, one by one. Sleep became a luxury few dared to indulge in. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. Every creak of the ship sounded like approaching doom. We armed ourselves, our weapons clutched tightly, our eyes darting nervously at each other. The captain, a man who had never shown fear, grew increasingly erratic. He paced the deck day and night, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if searching for an escape that did not exist. His orders became irrational, his temper volatile. The deaths continued, each more gruesome than the last. A burly pirate, known for his strength, was found with his limbs twisted at impossible angles, his body resembling a broken doll. Another simply vanished from the deck during a calm night, leaving no trace. The remaining crew descended into chaos. Trust evaporated entirely. We turned on each other, desperate to find a scapegoat, a reason for the relentless horror that was consuming us. Fights broke out, fueled by fear and suspicion, the decks becoming stained with more blood, this time our own. One by one they fell, some by the unseen force, others by the hands of their terrified comrades. The once proud pirate ship became a floating tomb, its decks littered with bodies, the silence broken only by the creaking of the timbers and the mournful cry of the gulls. I remained one of the last. The ship was eerily quiet, the air heavy with the stench of death. The fog began to roll in, a thick white blanket that obscured the horizon, isolating us further from the world. The captain was gone. I had seen him leap overboard in a fit of madness, his screams swallowed by the swirling mist. The other survivors had either succumbed to the curse or to each other's paranoia. I stood alone on the deserted deck, the fog growing denser, the silence more profound. The ship drifted aimlessly, carried by the currents, a ghost ship haunted by the memory of its cursed crew. The monastery, the massacre, the relentless deaths. It all led to this. An empty vessel sailing into the unknown, shrouded in mist, the curse unresolved, the silence absolute. The fog was dense, a swirling white shroud that clung to our ship, muffling the familiar sounds of the sea. Visibility was near zero, the lanterns on our own vessel barely cutting through the gloom. We navigated cautiously, the air thick with a damp chill. Then through the swirling mist, pinpricks of light appeared ahead, lanterns, another vessel perhaps lost in the fog like us. A flicker of anticipation ran through the crew, a potential prize, or at least some company in this isolating expanse. We altered course, our ship gliding silently through the fog towards the beckoning lights. As we drew nearer, the shapes of the lanterns became clearer, but the expected silhouette of another ship did not materialize. Instead, dozens of lights floated on the water's surface, bobbing gently in the mist, their flames flickering with an ethereal glow. An unnatural stillness fell over our deck. The usual boisterous chatter of the crew ceased, replaced by a transfixed silence. The sight was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. The lanterns seemed to drift independently, their arrangement random yet somehow captivating. We watched, our initial curiosity slowly morphing into something akin to awe and then a creeping discomfort. There was something unsettling about these disembodied lights, floating serenely in the fog-laden sea. Then it began. One of our men, a grizzled veteran who had seen his share of strange sights on the ocean, walked to the railing. His movements were fluid, almost dreamlike. Without a word, without a change in expression, he stepped over the side and into the dark, fog-shrouded water. A collective gasp rippled through the remaining crew. We rushed to the railing, peering into the gloom, but there was no sign of him, only the gentle bobbing of the lanterns and the swirling white mist. Before we could fully process what had occurred, another man followed, and then another, each one moving with the same strange serenity, stepping silently over the edge as if drawn by an invisible force. Their faces were blank, their eyes fixed on the glowing lanterns. Panic began to spread. The captain, his face grim, bellowed orders, though no sound escaped his throat, gesturing frantically for the helmsman to turn the ship around. We needed to retreat to escape this eerie phenomenon, but the ship seemed reluctant to obey. The sails, though catching what little breeze there was in the fog, did not respond as they should. We remained adrift, surrounded by the silent glowing lanterns and the slowly dwindling number of our crew. More men stepped overboard, their movements trance-like, their eyes fixed on the flickering lights. We tried to restrain them, to pull them back from the edge, but their bodies seemed to possess an unnatural strength, their minds lost to some unseen influence. The night wore on, the fog remaining thick and impenetrable. The lanterns continued to glow, their ethereal light illuminating the increasingly empty deck of our ship. The sounds of the sea were muted, the silence broken only by the occasional splash as another crew member succumbed to the silent pull. As dawn approached, painting the fog with a pale grey light, I found myself among the last few remaining on board. The lanterns still glowed in the distance, their number seemingly unchanged. Our ship drifted aimlessly, its sails slack, its deck deserted. The captain, along with the rest of the crew, was gone. I was alone, surrounded by the silent fog and the distant, unwavering lights, with no memory of how the others had departed, only the chilling certainty that I would soon follow. The opulent vessel, a floating palace of polished wood and gleaming brass, had been my sanctuary for weeks. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched outside my porthole, a tranquil scene that belied the terror that would soon erupt. The announcement came suddenly, a shout from the deck that sent a ripple of panic through the passengers. Pirates. They swarmed aboard with terrifying speed, their faces masked, their weapons glinting menacingly. The luxurious surroundings were instantly transformed into a stage for violence and fear. We were herded into the grand salon, our initial shock giving way to a chilling realization of our predicament. Their leader, a figure whose eyes radiated cold cruelty, addressed us, though no sound passed his lips. His gestures were clear enough: ransom, pay, or face the consequences. A palpable tension filled the room as the wealthy passengers considered their options, their lives suddenly reduced to a monetary value. Some readily agreed, their fear outweighing their greed. Others hesitated, their faces etched with worry. A few, myself included, refused, principle perhaps, or a stubborn defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Whatever the reason, our refusal was met with a chillingly simple response. One by one, those who declined were forced forward. A pirate, his face hidden by a bandana, produced a dagger. The cold steel pressed against my cheek, a searing pain as it sliced through the skin, a mark, a symbol of our defiance, or perhaps something far more sinister. The pirates collected their initial bounty, their greed temporarily satiated. They confined us to the lower decks, the opulent surroundings replaced by cramped, dimly lit quarters. A sense of dread settled upon us, a silent acknowledgement of the precariousness of our situation. Days passed, each one marked by a growing unease. Those who had been marked began to change. A subtle discoloration at first, around the edges of the dagger cut. Then a more pronounced pallor, a sickly grey hue spreading across their skin. The stench began subtly, a faint, unpleasant odour that grew steadily stronger. It was the smell of decay, of flesh gone bad. We watched in horror as those marked began to waste away. Their bodies grew gaunt, their eyes sunken. The area around the dagger cut festered, the skin peeling away to reveal raw, weeping wounds. Their flesh seemed to rot while they still breathed, a horrifying spectacle that defied any rational explanation. Their silent suffering filled the confined space with an unbearable tension. The pirates, initially gloating over their prize, began to show signs of alarm. They kept their distance from the marked passengers, their bravado replaced by a superstitious fear. Whispers circulated among them, though no words reached our ears. They sensed something unnatural, something beyond their understanding. One night the pirates were gone. Their ship, which had shadowed ours since the takeover, was no longer visible. They had abandoned us, their greed overshadowed by a primal terror of the affliction that was consuming the marked passengers. We were alone, adrift in the vast ocean, with the slowly decaying bodies of our fellow passengers. The stench was overwhelming now, the sight of their rotting flesh a constant source of horror. The unmarked among us huddled together, our fear compounded by a gnawing sense of helplessness. Then the discoloration began on me, a dark patch spreading from the dagger cut on my cheek. The familiar odour, which had been so repulsive on others, now emanated from my own skin. A cold dread washed over me as I understood my fate. The process was agonizing. My flesh began to blacken, the rot spreading rapidly across my face and body. I could feel the decay, the slow disintegration of my own being, yet I remained conscious, trapped within my failing body. The other unmarked passengers watched me, their faces a mixture of pity and terror. They kept their distance, their fear of contagion outweighing their compassion. I was alone in my suffering, the silent witness to my own gruesome demise. The ship drifted aimlessly, a vessel of death sailing across the endless ocean. The bodies of the other marked passengers lay still, their blackened flesh a testament to the curse that had claimed them, and I remained, the last survivor, my own body consumed by the same horrifying decay, my consciousness fading with the encroaching darkness. The vast ocean stretched around me, silent and indifferent to the horror unfolding within the ship. The seaside tavern reeked of salt and stale ale, a familiar haunt for those who plied their trade on the open sea. A woman sat alone in a dimly lit corner, her face obscured by the deep hood of her cloak. There was an aura about her, an ancient stillness that drew me in. I approached, a deal forming in my mind, information perhaps, or a hidden route to untold riches. She spoke of wealth beyond imagining, gold enough to fill our ship's hold to overflowing. The trade, she assured me, was simple, a mere trifle. A feeling of unease flickered within me, but the promise of such immense fortune was too tempting to resist. We struck an unspoken bargain, a silent agreement sealed with a nod. That night, as the ship lay anchored in the quiet cove, a change occurred. A faint shimmer emanated from the hold. Curiosity and anticipation drew me below deck. The sight that greeted me stole my breath. Gold, mountains of it spilling from chests, glinting in the dim light of my lantern. More wealth than we could have amassed in a lifetime of plunder. The mysterious woman had kept her word. A sense of triumph surged through me. We were rich beyond our wildest dreams. I returned to my cabin, the image of the overflowing hold imprinted on my mind, eager for the dawn so we could set sail with our newfound fortune. But the dawn brought horror. A blood-curdling scream echoed from the deck, followed by a chorus of terrified shouts. I rushed above, my heart pounding with a sudden icy dread. The scene that unfolded before me was a nightmare made real. My crew, their hands, they were withering, the flesh receding, the skin peeling away in strips, revealing the white, brittle bone beneath. Their faces were contorted in agony, their eyes wide with shock and terror. The affliction spread rapidly. Arms, legs, faces, the flesh seemed to melt away, leaving skeletal figures draped in tattered remnants of skin. The air filled with the stench of decay, a sickeningly sweet odor that turned my stomach. I looked at my own hands. The skin was taut, discolored, the veins beneath appearing as dark, branching lines. A wave of nausea washed over me as I watched the flesh begin to recede, the bone of my fingers peeking through. The gold remained untouched in the hold, its glittering allure now a cruel mockery of our condition. We were rich beyond measure, yet our bodies were failing, our flesh abandoning us. The simple trade with the mysterious woman had come at a price far more terrible than any of us could have imagined. The ship became a vessel of the damned, its hold filled with treasure, its deck populated by decaying figures. We were adrift, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, but our bodies were betraying us, returning to dust while we still drew breath. The vast ocean stretched before us, offering no escape, no cure, only the slow, agonizing process of our physical dissolution. The gold remained, a silent, shining testament to our cursed bargain. The chase had been long, the slaver ship a tempting prize laden with potential laborers for our own endeavors. We finally cornered it under a sky bruised with the colors of twilight. Our boarding was swift, our intentions clear. We expected resistance, perhaps a brief struggle, but the silence that greeted us was unsettling. The deck was deserted, no crew, no captives, only the remnants of a recent voyage, loose chains clanking against the railings, a pot of stew still emitting warmth over a dead fire. An unnatural stillness clung to the vessel, a void where the sounds of human suffering should have been. We searched the cabins, the hold, every corner of the ship, empty. It was as if the occupants had vanished into thin air, leaving behind their belongings and the lingering scent of their presence. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. This felt wrong, a silent trap waiting to be sprung. As darkness enveloped the sea, we gathered on the deck, our initial excitement replaced by a growing apprehension. The stars emerged, cold and distant in the inky sky. A chill wind whispered through the rigging, carrying with it a sense of isolation. Then they appeared. Figures at the mast, their forms indistinct in the gloom, yet undeniably present. They stood motionless, their gaze fixed upon us, their eyes reflecting the faint starlight with an unsettling hollowness. They did not speak, did not move, simply observed us with an unnerving intensity. A wave of discomfort rippled through our crew. We were seasoned pirates, not easily spooked, but there was something profoundly disturbing about these silent watchers. Their stillness, their sheer number, created an atmosphere of mounting dread. The disappearances began with the deeper hours of the night. A shout abruptly cut short, swallowed by the sound of the waves crashing against the hull. One of our men, a burly pirate known for his booming laughter, was gone. No struggle, no sign of what had taken him. Panic began to simmer beneath the surface of our bravado. We huddled together, our weapons drawn, our eyes scanning the darkness. The figures at the mast remained, their silent vigil unbroken. Another scream, this one laced with pure terror, echoed briefly before being extinguished by the wind and the sea. Another of our crew vanished without a trace. The unseen force that was picking us off was swift and efficient, leaving no clues, no witnesses. The night became a blur of fear and paranoia. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. Every sound sent shivers down our spines. We turned on each other, suspicion clouding our judgment. Accusations were muttered, weapons were brandished, the unity of our crew dissolving under the weight of the unknown terror. As the first hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, the disappearances ceased. The figures at the mast were gone. A fragile sense of relief washed over the remaining few of us, but it was short-lived. We looked around, our numbers drastically reduced. The slaver ship, the vessel we had intended to claim as our own, now felt like a haunted tomb. The emptiness that had greeted us upon boarding had returned, amplified by the loss of our own crew. With the rising sun, we prepared to leave, eager to put this cursed vessel behind us. But as we turned our own ship towards the horizon, we looked back. The slaver ship was gone, vanished. The spot where it had been anchored was now empty, the waves rolling undisturbed. There was no wreckage, no sign of its departure. It was as if it had never been there at all. The vast ocean stretched before us, silent and indifferent, offering no explanation for the night's horrors or the ship's sudden disappearance. The sight of the warship on the horizon was a stroke of unimaginable luck. Adrift, silent but in perfect condition, its cannons loaded, its stores untouched. It was a prize beyond our wildest dreams, a vessel capable of unmatched power. We boarded with a mixture of awe and avarice, claiming it as our own. The initial days were filled with celebration. We marveled at the ship's superior craftsmanship, its formidable weaponry. Our pirate crew, accustomed to a more ramshackle existence, reveled in our newfound fortune. We felt invincible, masters of a vessel that seemed destined for greatness, but a subtle disquiet began to creep into our revelry. The ship, while magnificent, possessed an unnerving stillness, an almost expectant silence. It responded to our commands, but there was a sense that it was merely tolerating our presence, its true nature yet to be revealed. Then the anomalies began. The sails would shift, catching a breeze that none of us could feel. The ship would alter course, veering away from our intended destination without any order being given. We attributed it to the currents, to the vagaries of the wind, but a seed of doubt had been planted. The wheel started to turn on its own, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. But as the days passed, the autonomous rotations became more pronounced, more insistent. We would find the helm spinning, the ship changing direction with no hand upon the spokes. Attempts to override the wheel proved futile. It resisted our efforts with an unseen strength, its movements resolute, as if guided by an invisible helmsman. A chilling realization dawned. We were no longer in control. The ship had a will of its own. Fear began to replace our initial excitement. We were passengers now on a vessel that sailed according to its own mysterious agenda. We watched helplessly as the familiar constellations shifted in the night sky, our course taking us further and further into uncharted waters. The sun rose and set, marking the passage of days that blurred into a monotonous cycle of apprehension. The ship sailed onward, its purpose unknown to us. We huddled together, our fear growing with each passing mile, the silence of the warship amplifying our sense of helplessness. The horizon remained empty, offering no clues to our destination. The ship maintained its unwavering course, its sails billowing in phantom winds, the wheel turning with an unseen hand. We were at its mercy, carried towards an unknown fate by a vessel we no longer commanded. The vast ocean stretched before us, a silent testament to our loss of control, the chilling uncertainty of what lay ahead, our only companion. The vast expanse of the ocean had been our domain for weeks. The Spanish galleon, laden with riches from the New World, cut through the waves, its sails billowing under the warm sun. A sense of accomplishment and anticipation permeated the air among the crew. Our journey was nearing its end, and the treasures we carried would soon reach their destination. Then the horizon darkened, not with clouds, but with sails. Multiple sails, their silhouettes growing larger with alarming speed. A sense of dread washed over the deck as the realization dawned. Pirates, not just one ship, but a fleet descending upon us like vultures. The attack was swift and brutal. Our cannons roared in defiance, but we were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The pirate ships surrounded us, their crews swarming onto our deck with terrifying ferocity. The clash of steel echoed across the water, mingled with the cries of the wounded. Our resistance was valiant, but ultimately futile. I fought alongside my comrades, the taste of salt and blood filling my mouth, but one by one our ranks thinned. The pirates were relentless, their movements fueled by a savage hunger for gold. Our captain, a proud and honourable man, fell early in the battle, struck down by a merciless blow. With our leader gone and our defences breached, the fight quickly turned into a massacre. Those who surrendered were spared, but the look in the pirates' eyes offered no comfort. We were prisoners now, our fate uncertain. After securing their prize, the pirates gathered us survivors on the deck. Their captain, a figure of immense cruelty, addressed us with a cold, commanding presence, though no words were spoken. His gaze swept over our terrified faces, conveying a clear message of dominance. We were forced into servitude. While the pirates celebrated their victory and divided their loot, we were put to work, our hands raw from rowing. Day and night we toiled under the scorching sun, the rhythmic creak of the oars our constant companion. The pirates watched us with hawk-like intensity, their weapons never far from reach. As darkness fell each night, a new terror descended upon us. One by one our fellow captives began to disappear. They would be there one moment, rowing alongside us, and gone the next, vanished into the inky blackness of the sea. Whispers of fear circulated among us, though no words were uttered aloud. We knew, with a chilling certainty, that these disappearances were no accident. The nights became a time of dread, each creak of the ship, each splash of water sending shivers down our spines. We huddled together for what little comfort we could find, our eyes darting nervously into the darkness, fearing who might be next. Then, one morning, the truth of their fate was revealed. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, we saw them, floating in the water, their lifeless bodies bobbing gently in the waves. Their skin was pale and bloated, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles, mutilated. Their eyes, wide and vacant, stared up at the sky, reflecting the blood-red stain of the moon that had hung so ominously the night before. A collective gasp of horror rippled through the remaining survivors. The pirates, however, showed no emotion, their faces grim and impassive. The disappearances continued night after night, the number of survivors dwindling with each passing dawn. Hope, which had flickered faintly in our hearts, was now all but extinguished. We were living on borrowed time, each sunrise a reprieve from the inevitable. I became the last. I rowed alone, my body aching, my spirit broken. The pirates watched me, their expressions unreadable. The galleon sailed on, its destination unknown to me. The only certainty was the cold dread that gnawed at my insides. Another night fell. The moon, a malevolent crimson eye in the sky, cast its eerie glow upon the water. I rowed, my movements mechanical, my mind numb. The silence of the night was broken only by the creak of the oars and the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull. Then I saw them again, floating in the distance, their pale forms illuminated by the moon's ghastly light. More bodies, my comrades. Their vacant eyes seemed to stare directly at me, accusing, foretelling my own grim fate. The galleon sailed on into the heart of the night. The moon hung high above, its crimson light bathing the scene in an unsettling glow. I continued to row, the last survivor on a ghost ship, surrounded by the silent, accusing faces of the dead. The vast ocean stretched out before me, an endless expanse of darkness offering no escape. and in the blood-stained reflection on the water I saw my own terror staring back. The island had always been our sanctuary. Generations had lived and traded here, the turquoise waters, lush jungle providing everything we needed. Our lives were simple, dictated by the tides and the seasons, a peaceful existence far removed from the turmoil of the wider world. The crimson orb that ascended that night, unlike any moon I had ever witnessed. It bathed the island in an unsettling red glow, painting the familiar landscape in shades of blood and fire. A tremor of disquiet ran through the village, a sense that this celestial anomaly heralded something terrible. That night the sea brought death. A dark shape appeared on the horizon, growing larger with alarming speed. A ship, its silhouette menacing against the lurid moonlight. It moved with an unnatural swiftness, slicing through the calm waters towards our shores. Panic rippled through the settlement as the realization dawned. Pirates. They descended upon us like a storm, a horde of shadowy figures emerging from the darkness. Their arrival was heralded not by words, but by screams and the clash of weapons. Homes were breached, doors splintered, and the night air filled with cries of terror. I scrambled from my dwelling, seeking refuge in the dense foliage that fringed the village. From my hidden vantage point, I witnessed the unfolding horror. Flames erupted across the settlement, licking at the thatched roofs, turning homes into inferno. The red moonlight reflected off the dancing flames, creating a macabre spectacle. The pirates moved through the village with brutal efficiency, their actions swift and merciless. I saw neighbors, friends, families cut down without hesitation. There was no resistance, only desperate attempts to flee, to hide, to survive. But there was nowhere to escape the pirates' relentless rampage. Their silhouettes moved through the burning village, their forms illuminated the flickering light, enacting unspeakable atrocities. The sounds of the massacre echoed through the night. The crackling of flames, the shattering of wood, the cries of anguish. I pressed myself deeper into the undergrowth, my heart pounding in my chest, tears streaming down my face. All I could do was watch, helpless as my world was consumed by violence. The hours crawled by, each moment an eternity of fear, dread. The red moon hung high in the sky, a silent witness to the carnage below. The fires raged, casting an eerie glow over the devastation. The pirates continued their grim work, their figures moving relentlessly through the ruins. As the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky, the crimson moon began to fade, its malevolent light replaced by the pale hues of morning. The fires, though still burning, seemed less intense in the growing light, and then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the pirates were gone. Their ship, a dark silhouette against the rising sun, sailed away, leaving behind a scene of utter destruction. I remained hidden, my body trembling, waiting for some sign, some indication that it was safe to emerge. The sun climbed higher, casting its light upon the ravaged village. Slowly, cautiously, I made my way back. What I found was a scene of absolute desolation. Homes were reduced to smouldering ruins. The ground was littered with debris and the bodies of those who had not escaped. A thick layer of ash coated everything, a grim reminder of the night's terror. But it was the silence that truly chilled me. An absolute, profound silence. There were no voices, no cries, no sounds of life whatsoever. The only sounds were the crackling of the remaining fires and the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. I walked through the ruins of what had once been a vibrant community. I saw familiar faces, now still and lifeless. I called out, my voice a mere whisper in the vast emptiness, but there was no response. No one stirred. I searched every corner of the village, every home, every hiding place, but there was no one, only the dead. The pirates had left no soul untouched. The sun rose higher, bathing the island in its warm light, but the warmth offered no comfort. The beauty of our sanctuary was marred by the devastation. The vibrant life that had once thrived here was extinguished. I stood in the center of the ruined village, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and indifferent. The jungle loomed behind, silent and still. There was no sign of life anywhere, only me, alone in the ruins of a world that was gone, and the silence remained, heavy and absolute, a chilling testament to the horror that had unfolded under the red moon. The enemy vessel offered a fierce resistance, but our numbers and our ruthlessness ultimately prevailed. The clash of steel, the cries of the dying, the triumphant shouts of our crew. These were the familiar sounds of victory. We left no one alive, ensuring our dominance on these waters remained unchallenged. As their ship sank beneath the waves, we turned our own vessel towards the horizon, the spoils of our conquest secure. Then the storm descended. It appeared without warning, the sky turning an ominous shade of grey, the air growing heavy with an unnatural stillness. But there was no wind to fill our sails, no rain to lash our faces. Only a profound silence, broken by a sound that sent a chill down our spines. Screaming. It came from the water itself, a chorus of voices rising from the depths, agonized cries, desperate pleas, the echoes of pain and terror. It was the sound of those we had slain, their final moments replayed in an endless, horrifying loop. The sea around us began to change. The familiar blue transformed into a sickening crimson, the water swirling with a viscous, blood-like consistency. The ship, which had been sailing smoothly moments before, now refused to move, as if held captive by an unseen force. A wave of fear washed over our crew. We were seasoned pirates, accustomed to the dangers of the sea, but this was different. This was not a natural storm. This was something else, something born of the carnage we had inflicted. One of our men, his face pale with terror, pointed towards the water. A hand, pale and lifeless, emerged from the red depths, grasping at the side of the ship. Before anyone could react, the pirate was pulled overboard with a strangled cry, his own screams joining the chorus rising from the sea. Panic erupted. We scrambled back, our weapons drawn, but there was nothing to fight. The enemy was the sea itself, the voices of the dead reaching out from the crimson depths. Another pirate was dragged under, his struggles brief and futile against the unseen force. The red water churned around him, his screams echoing those of our victims. One by one our crew began to disappear, pulled beneath the surface, their terror adding to the cacophony of the damned. The ship remained stuck, held fast in the blood-red sea. The screaming intensified, a deafening chorus of anguish that seemed to claw at our sanity. We clung to the railings, our knuckles white, our eyes wide with the horrifying realization of our fate. I watched as my comrades vanished, their faces contorted in final moments of terror. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The sea surrounded us, a crimson shroud filled with the voices of the dead claiming its due. The screaming grew louder, the red water swirling around my feet. A cold, unseen hand grasped my ankle, pulling me towards the edge of the ship. I clawed at the wood, my fingers scraping against the rough surface, but the force was too strong. I was dragged towards the crimson abyss, the chorus of screams reaching a fever pitch. The last thing I saw was the blood-red sea rising to meet me, the surface churning with the unseen forms of the vengeful dead. My own scream joined the chorus as I was pulled beneath the waves into the cold, dark depths, the sound of the damned echoing all around me. The ship remained above, a silent testament to our sins, surrounded by the endless, unforgiving Red Sea and the ceaseless screams. The salt spray stung my face as we left the shores of England behind. The vast expanse of the oceans stretched before us, promising a new life in the Americas. Days bled into weeks, marked by the creak of the timbers, the endless horizon, and the camaraderie among the passengers. We were a small community, bound by our shared journey and hopes for the future. Then the mists began. They rolled in silently, a white curtain obscuring the familiar blue of the sea. Visibility dwindled, and a strange stillness descended upon the vessel. The usual sounds of the ship, the flapping of the sails, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull, seemed muted, almost swallowed by the fog. A prickle of discomfort ran down my spine, a feeling that something was amiss. Out of the swirling grey it materialized, a shape, stark against the white, growing larger with alarming speed, a ship, but unlike any I'd ever encountered. Its sails were the colour of night, billowing in a breeze that we did not seem to feel. It moved with an unsettling swiftness, cutting through the water as if propelled by some unseen force. Panic rippled through our ship as the dark vessel drew alongside. Figures swarmed its deck, their forms indistinct in the mist, yet radiating an aura of menace. Before anyone could react, grappling hooks were flung across, biting into our railings with a sickening thud. The silence shattered, not with words, but with the clash of steel and the cries of the injured. They were upon us, a wave of brutal force. I scrambled back, trying to avoid the chaos, but there was nowhere to go. The narrow confines of the deck offered no escape. I witnessed scenes of unimaginable horror. Passengers and crew alike fell before the attackers, their struggles brief and desperate. The air became thick with the metallic tang of blood. I pressed myself against the mast, pounding in my chest, praying to remain unseen. Some brave souls attempted to fight back, their resistance futile against the overwhelming numbers. Their defiance was met with swift and merciless brutality. One by one they were cut down, their bodies falling to the blood-soaked deck. Then they came for the survivors. Those of us who had not been struck down were rounded up, herded together like animals. There was no communication, no demand for valuables, just a cold, efficient violence. We were forced towards the hold, the darkness within, promising an unknown terror. Down the narrow, creaking stairs we were driven, the stench of bilge and damp wood filling my nostrils. The hatch slammed shut above us, plunging us into absolute darkness. A collective gasp rose from the huddled mass of humanity, followed by a chilling silence. Then it began. The sounds from above. Screams. Agonized, drawn-out shrieks that clawed at our sanity. They echoed through the wooden planks, painting vivid pictures of the horrors unfolding on deck. We could only listen, trapped in our black prison, as the slaughter continued. The sounds eventually faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. But the silence offered no comfort. We knew what had transpired. We were the forgotten ones, left to an unknown fate. Then a new smell permeated the air. Acrid and sharp, it stung our eyes and throats. Smoke, it curled down through the cracks in the hatch. A thin tendril at first, then growing denser, thicker. Panic erupted anew. We surged towards the hatch, a desperate mass clawing at the unyielding wood. The smoke intensified, choking us, burning our lungs. Coughs and gasps filled the hold as we struggled for breath. Our eyes streamed, blurring our vision in the suffocating darkness. We beat against the hatch, our fists raw and bleeding, but it remained sealed, an impassable barrier between us and the outside world. The heat became unbearable. The timbers around us began to groan and crackle. The smell of burning wood filled the air, mingling with the ever-present smoke. We sank to the floor, our strength failing, our hopes extinguished. The darkness remained, but now it was a darkness filled with the suffocating embrace of smoke and the searing heat of the flames. Our struggles grew weaker, our breaths shallower. The sounds of our desperation faded into the crackling roar of the fire. The last thing I perceived was the all-consuming heat and the bitter taste of smoke as consciousness slipped away. But even in that final moment, a sliver of awareness remained, a chilling certainty that this was not the end. This was merely a descent into something far more profound and terrifying. The darkness pressed in, absolute and unending.